Okay. Okay, here we go. So, when last we left, we were in the middle of fixing something with zombie AI, and my brain cramped up and I couldn't remember how to do distances. So, let's deal with that first. If I press play here, you'll see nothing happens because I'm getting an error, and if I go to my console, it will say there's an error identified because you stopped in the middle of an expression. So let's double click that and open it up in Visual Studio. So what I was trying to do was say if the zombie gets within a certain attack range, we want the zombie to stop and attack. And I was trying to tie it to stopping distance, and that's not correct at all. So let's go back up to the top here and create a public float called my attack range. And basically what we want to do is we want to check to see, is the zombie close enough to start the attack process, the attack animation, and do damage to the player. And the way we're going to do that, there's a couple of ways we could do it. We could say if vector3.distance, and you can put in two vectors. So I can put in transform.position and my target.transform.position. Position. Is less than or equal to my attack range, then do attack step. However, that is not how we're going to do it. I'm showing you that you can do it this way because I have to talk about math for a second. And I'm sorry, because I know it's not everyone's favorite thing, but it is my favorite thing, which is why I have a degree in mathematics. So the deal here is that if you want to get distance between two vectors, you have to take the square root of, perform a square root function in order to determine the distance between them. I'm not going to go into why, just know that every time it does this, you have to take the square root of the vector's magnitude in order to determine the distance between the two things. And finding the square root of something is slow, but squaring something or multiplying something by itself is really fast. So this will work, and for what we're doing, it would really be fine. But the better way to do it is to use the square of the magnitudes in order to get the distance. And if you're just doing distance transformation, this is by far a better way to do it. So instead of doing this, I'm going to comment this out by putting two forward slashes in front of it. The reason I'm commenting it out is so that we can compare the differences here in a second. So I'm going to create a new vector3 called my distance value. And I'll set that equal to my target dot transform dot position minus transform dot position. Okay, so vectors can be added and subtracted just like scalar numbers. So just like you can add 3 and 7 together, you can add a vector that has an x, y, and z component together. You can also subtract them, and when you find the difference between them, in fact, let's call this my difference vector because that's actually clearer. My difference vector. You can find the difference between them by subtracting the values, and that'll give you a new vector that's the vector from one vector to another vector. So this will give me a vector that will show me the difference between two vectors. Then I'm going to create a new float called my squared magnitude. And that's going to be equal to my difference vector dot square magnitude. I don't even have to do anything because it automatically knows. This is such a common thing that it's actually built-in functionality for vector 3s. So this is going to say, go get the magnitude and square it. Then I'm going to do my if statement. So if my square magnitude is less than or equal to my attack range times my attack range. So what I've done there is I've squared my attack range. And if the square is, if the distance squared is less than the squared magnitude, then the distance is less than the distance. So that is a much more memory efficient way of programming the same question of, am I close enough? So let's save that. And I'm going to actually put a debug log in here that says debug.log. I attack you in the face plus time.time. The reason I'm adding the time.time clause is so that I can see at what timestamp the zombie is actually attacking, and it will do a bunch of them over and over. We're going to want to comment that out and remove it. So I'm going to save that. Come back to my game. My wheel's going to spin. And I'm going to press play. And my game now works. So I'm going to get close to my zombie. Now, notice that I'm not getting anything down here. I'm not getting anything in the console. And the reason is his current attack range is 0, but his stopping distance is 2. I'm going to set his attack range to be a little farther away than his stopping distance. So let's go back up in here. Grab our zombies. I'm going to change this back to alphabetical sorting so that I can grab them more efficiently. Grab both of them and go to zombie AI. My attack range, make attack range 2.5. So they'll start attacking when they're 2.5 meters out. They'll stop moving when they're 2 meters out. So they'll transition from their normal movement to their attack animation once we put the attack animation in, which we have not done, I don't think. No, okay, which is fine. No, we do. We have it in here. Okay. So we're not going to animate it yet, but we will in just a second. So I'm going to press play so we can see if the attack actually goes off. And I attacked you in the face. So he's just standing there attacking me over and over, and now he's stopped because he's greater than too far away. He's back chasing me, and now he's attacking me. So now I know for sure that my attack distance check works, and I can get on with the business of animating it and creating effects and all that stuff. So that's just to get our game to a working state, which where we did not leave it last week. So let me pause here and talk about some other things. First of all, I've been letting my project get out of hand. And if I look in my assets folder, I've got a bunch of scripts here that really should be in my scripts folder. So I'm going to just highlight them and drag them to my scripts folder. Make sure you don't copy and paste them. You should just drag them because if you have 2 copies of a script, in your project, Unity and Visual Studio will complain. So my scripts. Okay. Also in my scripts, you should have a script called Object Pooler, which we haven't done anything with yet. That was in the email I sent this morning. If you don't have that, let me know now because you need it for what we're going to do this evening.
I have it. I just want to double check. You should have been able to drag it directly into Unity. I just dragged it from files into Unity. Yeah. And it seemed to have worked. Okay. Yeah. I just want to make sure.
Absolutely. Okay. So, we'll get back to Object Pooler when we start talking about object pooling. But first I have to tell you about the thing that I was stupid about. Well, no, that's not what we're going to do first. First, the effects were really bugging me because they didn't look very good. And remember how I said you can spend hours doing it? There's no reason for you to watch me spend hours doing it because you don't care. And you kind of have a sense of how to do it. And it's pretty boring watching someone play an effect, slightly change a value, play an effect, slightly change a value. And I think you've seen enough of that from me. So instead of going through and reworking the effects, I spent some time making them look significantly better and then sent them to you in a Unity asset package. So I want to show you how importing assets works in Unity. So I'm going to come over here to Assets, and I'm going to click Import Package, Custom Package. There's a couple of different ways you can get assets into Unity. You can import new assets, you can go get things from the asset store, or you can insert custom packages. So I'm going to click Insert Custom Package, and I stored mine in my game dev folder. And it's called Very Slightly Better Effects.Unity Package. So I'm going to click Open. And when I open this, it's going to open in another window. You'll see that it's got a couple things. It's got my effects, Effect New Blood Prefab, Effect Wall Impact Prefab, and then my materials, Blood Splatter Matte, and my textures, Blood Splatter.png. Interestingly, the blood splatter material and the blood splatter PNG are unchecked and grayed out. The reason for that is when you build the package, when you build the package in Unity to export, it will grab all the dependencies. And so it knows it needs the material and the PNG for the blood splatter in order to make these effects work. But I already have them in my project. So it says, okay, I will go ahead and grab those, but when you're trying to re-import into this project, you don't need them, so I'll go ahead and uncheck them for you. If you like, you may check them and re-import them, and it will just overwrite what you have. There's no reason to, because they're exactly the same. And in fact, it checks to see if they're exactly the same. And notice that the Effect New Blood prefab says new, because it's completely new, because I gave it a new name. Effect Wall Impact prefab, I failed to give it a new name, so it is going to overwrite our existing wall impact, but I don't care about that because I don't like the existing one. So if you want to rename your existing wall impact prefab, you can do that before you import, but you really don't need to because the new one's way better. It goes and checks and says, hey, this doesn't exist in your project at all. This exists but has been changed, and these exist and haven't been changed. And so it is smart enough to know what you actually want to import, which is pretty slick. So I'm going to click Import. And now those effects are actually in the My Effects folder, Effect New Blood and Effect Wall Impact. If we want to take a look at what they look like now, I can drag them into the scene and show them to you. Here's our new blood spurt, which is much less cartoony and looks good and works better. And the Effect Wall Impact is going to look like this. So when I hit the concrete wall, it's going to look pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and delete those out of the scene. They're still in my prefabs folder, in my effects folder rather. Grab my player, and remember that we define the impacts in the player's impact handler script. So I'm going to drag New Blood and Effect Wall Impact. And now, when I shoot the zombies, we should see a better impact. But that gets to the thing I was dumb about. I kept saying, you know how the physics suddenly stops and it stops doing the impacts because it's running out of memory? That's true, and that's what we're going to use object pooling for. But that's not why it was suddenly stopping in our environment last week. So let me show you what I was talking about. I'm going to press play, and I'm going to shoot the wall a couple times, and it looks like it's working fine, but when I move, it suddenly stops working. And I was attributing that incorrectly to physics running out of memory. Oh, let me show you the hit. I think that looks a little better. And if you don't like it, you can do your own hit, but I just think that looks a little nicer. It spawns closer to the center of the model. It's not quite so garish and outlandish. But I'm suddenly not hitting. I can hit the zombies, so physics didn't stop. That was not the problem. So what was the problem? Well, it's the dumbest thing in the whole world. Let's try this again. To the player. Come on. But let's not maximize on play. Let's just play it this way. When I press play, the player can shoot at the walls. But once he takes a step forward, he goes up a little bit because of the way the animation is rigged. He's actually a little bit above the ground now, which is something we actually need to fix. But because of that, my line, which is coming out from the center of my character, hang on, go back so you can see it in the same. Got me hemmed in. Come on, zombies, leave me alone. My line is just not intersecting with the cubes because they're not high enough. That's what was happening. So, one, we need to offset the player's height so that he stays on the ground. And I can show you more clearly that by getting down at his feet and tilting in. So let's go down to the player. See how he's floating above the ground just a little bit? And that's due to the nature of the animation. We can fix that, and we're going to. The zombies are similarly a little bit up, and we can fix that as well. We have to change their nav mesh agent offsets, but we'll do that. But the big thing is we should make the walls bigger so the impacts keep happening. Okay, that is the easiest thing in the world to do. So I'm going to do this, and I know that I want to increase all my walls in the Y direction, so I can just drag the Y scale from 1 to, let's say, 3. Now I want you to notice that when I did that, they extended into the terrain. Okay? This is important because I want you to watch what happens when I press play now. Because remember, all of these has a rigid body and a box glider, and the engine is going to try and do physics on these boxes, and they're stuck in the terrain. Yeah, that's not what I want. That is not what is intended. That is not as designed. So
It is pretty impressive, though.
Honestly, I feel like pro video game companies should start taking notes, because that is not how it's supposed to work.
It is not. My wife's favorite bug ever was I was working on my pirate game that I've been working on for years and years now, and navigating a ship on a moving ocean is a challenge, and the physics interaction caused my ship to fly off into the sky and never come down. We don't know how far it went or where it went, and she laughed at that for a good long while. I was showing her how cool my ocean looked with its new boats and everything, and then it flew off into the sky. Okay, anyway, they're 3 units high, so if I set it at 1.5, they should be sitting exactly on the ground. We can verify that by zooming in, making sure we're not underneath the terrain. And then now press play. I can shoot the wall all day long, even after I move. The wall's still blocking the bullets. I can shoot my zombies. And I killed them. Okay. So, but again, we do have a real problem that we have to fix, which is that the impacts are being created over and over, so they're flooding our hierarchy. And while 30 or 40 isn't enough to end your game, we want to kill thousands of zombies, so this impact is going to happen a gazillion times, and we don't want it to happen a gazillion times because it will be stored in the hierarchy over and over, and eventually the computer will run out of memory and crash. So there's a couple ways we can do this. One way is to ignore it and leave it like it is and let it just pile up and just trust that your players aren't really going to play that long. That's not a great solution. Another solution is to add something to the effects that causes them to destroy themselves after a couple of seconds. So we instantiate the effect, and then we destroy the effect. The problem with that is instantiating and destroying over and over can cause Unity to get muddled, let's say. And it can cause what's called a memory leak, where it starts to allocate memory for instantiations and then fail to clean them up when it goes to delete, and the memory allocation for the instantiations gets larger and larger and larger until your game crashes and your player quits in frustration. So that's not a great idea either. It does work as long as you keep it to a dull roar, and in some cases it's the right thing to do. But for something that we're instantiating as much as we're going to instantiate these impacts, which is our primary feedback to the player that he has shot something, it's not a great plan. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an object pool. And I have to talk about the concept here. An object pool says, okay, so what we're doing is we're instantiating a prefab over and over and over, which means we're creating one from scratch, a clone of it in the game over and over and over every time we need it. Instead of that, what we're going to do is we're going to create a pool of objects, and they will be activated and deactivated as needed rather than instantiated and destroyed. And the pool will keep our hierarchy pretty clean. And you'll see what I mean by that in just a second. So, to that end, I went out on the internet and learned about pooling, and I will send you the link to the tutorial that I read because it's extremely helpful, and we're going to implement exactly the implementation that I read on the tutorial that I read. And it's pretty slick. I would try and pass this off as my own work, but I didn't do anything here but copy and paste this, play with it for a weekend, and go, that is really neat. So here we go. Let's double click to open Object Pooler in the My Scripts folder. So let's double click that. Okay. First of all, and before we do anything else, make sure that this says Assembly C# right here in Visual Studio. That says that the script is part of your project. If it says miscellaneous files, there's a problem, and you need to tell me. Okay. So let's talk about what this does. So this is going to have our normal existing using. It's going to have using Unity Engine, System Collection Generic that we have at the beginning of every mono behavior script that we've ever written. Then it's got this order here. It's a system that's serializable. We've talked about this a little bit before. We used it for the impact handler, and it just says that the thing can be serialized, which means it can be edited in the inspector. You can edit it through other scripts, and you can store it. we're creating a class called object pool item that contains three things: the game object, the object you're going to pool, the amount you're going to pool, in other words, the number of objects you're going to create when the game starts, and then a Boolean called should expand. And I'll get into how should expand works in just a second. Then we've got the object pooler mono behavior, which is our main script, and it's going to have a static object pooler. So it's going to have a static shared instance of this class. I'll much later we can talk about what a static shared instance is, but basically it means there's going to be one, and we shouldn't have another one in the game because there should only be one object pooler. Then it's going to have a list of objects to pool, of items that you want to pool, and then it's going to have another list of my pooled objects. And then in void awake it says shared instance equals this, which means this object pooler, which is called shared instance, should be the only one in my scene, and you should set it to itself. This is just to make sure that there's not another object pooler somewhere in the scene. And if there is a second one, you will get an error because both scripts will simultaneously try to set both objects at the same time to itself. And that won't work. That'll cause an error, and that's how you check for that. There's some other ways you can check to make sure that a thing is singular in a scene, but this will work for what we're doing. And then in our start function, we're going to create a list of pooled objects. So we're going to create a new list. And then it's going to say, for every object pool item in items to pool, which is our first list, what items do you want me to pool? In our case, it's going to be the wall impact and the blood impact. We're going to do a for loop, and we're going to go through and pool the number of items specified in the attribute amount to pool. So as long as my count is fewer than my amount to pool, create a new item, instantiate a new item in my objects to pool. So remember I said before we were going to do instantiation and deletion, and now we're going to do pooling, which is just activate and deactivate. But we still have to instantiate all of the objects to begin with. We can do it manually, but I can do it with this script that takes 14 seconds. So we're going to do that instead because it's going to be faster and easier than manually creating a pool of objects. But you could, if you wanted to, manually create a pool of objects yourself. But I'm going to do it through a script. Then I'm going to take all of those objects in my list and set them equal to false. And I'm going to set I'm going to add each object to my list of pooled objects. So the first list is the items I'm going to pool, and it will be my blood impact and my wall impact. And the second list here is going to be populated by the simple phrase add that says take the object that I just created and add it to my list of pooled objects. You'll see what that looks like in just a second. Then we have a function called getPooledObject that says go and get the object that I need. So whenever we want one of these things to be instantiated, instead of calling instantiate, we will call getPooledObject, and it will go and get the next pooled object that is available. And that brings us to should expand. So one of the things you can do is you can say to the player, you can only have 3 of these things active at a time. For example, if you have, like the player has bombs, they can only have 3 out in the world set up at a time. So the object pool could be set to 3, but we wouldn't want the player to be able to generate more, or the game to generate more, if it feels like it needs one. We would just say, nope, you can't do that. You've already got 3 out in the world. There's some other ways we could programmatically deal with that. But should expand is a wonderful little thing that was included in the script that says, if you want me to, I'll keep instantiating objects and adding them to the pool if the game demands more than you actually need. So I can keep up with the demand if you want me to. So we're going to see how that works in just a second. So let's go into Unity. Let's go into our game. And I'm going to go game object, create empty. And I'm going to set it at 0, 0, 0, just so it's out of the way. And I'm going to call it object pooler. I'm going to add component, object pooler, and you'll see I've got some drop downs here, and it says items to pool and pooled objects. Pooled objects we're going to leave alone for right now. Items to pool, we're going to have 2 things. We're going to add our, go to my effects. We're going to add our blood impact. And we're going to add our wall impact. Now, there is one thing we're going to have to update here, which is the way that this works. If I go back to my script real quick, it says, when I get a pool object, go and grab the one where my tag matches the tag that I need. But effect new blood and effect wall impact both have the tag of untagged. I'm going to fix that right now, so we're going to be able to give it the correct tag depending on what circumstance we're talking about. So I'm going to click effect new blood, go to tag, and add tag, zombie hit, and I'm going to add tag, well, I'm just going to call it zombie impact actually. Come on. Zombie impact. So what it's saying is you removed a tag and it can't gracefully deal with that, so it's just gonna leave it as removed until the next time I load the project, which is fine. And wall impact. Okay, so we're gonna go back to new blood and give it a tag of zombie impact, zombie impact, and go back to wall impact and give it a tag of wall impact. Okay, so now when I go to my object pooler, okay, so the first thing we want to do is just play through and show you it generating the pool. So I'm going to say generate 5 bloods and generate 25 wall impacts. Pooled objects is still 0 because I haven't created anything yet. I'm going to leave the game off of maximize on play so that we can watch in the hierarchy what happens. I'm going to press play, and I'm going to press pause. Okay, so let's see what happened. It created 5 clones of new blood and 25 clones of wall impact, and it added them to the list called pooled objects. They are all deactivated right now because we haven't told it to activate any of them. So it creates them and then it deactivates them. And remember that if an object is deactivated in Unity, it doesn't take up any memory. The game just doesn't consider it at all. The game engine is very efficient about ignoring deactivated objects. So having a bunch of them in your scene is not a huge deal. So what we need to do now is to activate our objects when we shoot at them. So we can handle this in a couple different places, but I think probably the place that makes the most sense is going to be in our shot handler, which is currently generating that effect. So I'm going to go to my simple player. I'm going to open up my shot handler. Okay. Okay. So what I'm looking for is where do I instantiate the game object, and it's right here. This line 33. It says instantiate hit effect particle. So it's already gone out and gotten the impact handler has already given it the effect. So we already know what hit effect it's going to be using. So let me comment out this because we now do not want it to instantiate an effect. We wanted it instead to go get the effect. So I'm sorry, I'm looking at my notes to make sure I don't mess this up. Yep. Okay. So, we're going to say here, instead of instantiate game object, we're going to say if my effect, sorry. We're going to say, before we do that, I'm looking at 2 different windows, sorry. Game object, my effect equals object pooler dot get impact effect hit dot collider dot game object dot tag. object pooler. Oh, not get impact effect. Unless I change the object pooler. 1 second. Object pooler dot. Yeah, it should be get pooled object, not get impact effect. Get pooled object. Why is that not happening? Yeah, that's right. Oh, it's mad because it says, hey, you don't have an object pooler in here. So, is that right? No, that should be taken into account by the... Oh. Damn, darn. Okay, so let's see. It says, what it's saying is, an object reference is required for the non-static field method of property object pooler.getPooledObject string. And we have one. So I'm not sure what's happening here. So let's save this, make sure the object pooler is saved. And that's right. Okay, so see, I keep reading the wrong line. Okay, so this should say object pooler dot shared instance. That get pooled object, and that should clear it. Yeah, okay. So again, what was happening there was it was requiring that I specify which object pooler I'm talking about, and remember that we only have one, and it's called shared instance. So I was getting confused because the object pooler has the function of get pooled object, but it was saying, which object pooler do you want me to use? And my brain was going, there's only one. Use the only one you have. Anyway, that's what it was saying there. So now we have an effect that has been coming from our pool. So I'm going to say, if my effect is not equal to null, in other words, if I found an effect in my pool, then my effect dot transform dot position equals hit dot position, and my effect dot transform dot rotation is equal to my rotation. Remember, we created before we created my row. Come on. At that point, I could have just typed it out. Hit that position should be hit dot point, and I misspelled the word rotation. Okay. Remember that earlier we had said the rotation is going to be set to the look rotation from the normal. In other words, the vector pointing straight out of the surface that I hit, using the vector 3 up. That's why the blood spurts look like they come from different directions on the zombies, and it looks like I correctly hit the wall. So I'm going to set the, and then finally I'm going to say my effect dot set active true. Okay. So what this is doing is saying, when I hit the thing, take the object while it's still disabled, it was still inactive, put it at the position, rotate it to the right position, then make it active. And that should cause the effect to be generated in the game. So let's save that and go back to Unity, and I'm going to press play. Okay, so I'm going to pause it real quick. I got my 5 blood clones and my 25 wall clones. So I'm going to hit play, and I'm going to shoot. And I'm not generating anything at all. And the reason is because the tag is not matching. So let me go and figure out where that's set. So this is my object pooler. There's my new blood. Just expand.
In the code line, it's saying that my effect.transform.position equals my rotation. That line, my rotation is coming up as an error. Everything else is working, but on that second line,
it should be my transform.rotation.
Rotation. Yeah. Oh, there it is. Thank you. I
Yep.
put position.
Yep. Okay. So
Thank you.
the problem is that the tag is not correct. I set those up incorrectly. That's the problem. So the hit.collider.gameObject.tag is the tag of the thing I hit. And it's also the tag I'm passing to the getPooledObject command. So what I need to do is make sure that the tag of the thing I hit, the wall, which has a tag of wall, and the zombie, which has a tag of zombie, I need to make sure that those tags are associated with their impacts. Correct symbol player. Let's go, or my effects actually. Go to my new blood, and instead of using zombie impact, let's just use zombie. And then for wall impact, we'll use wall. And that makes sense now that I think about it. What this is going to do is say anything that's got the tag of wall will have the wall impact applied to it. So let's press play now. Let's press pause to show we created 5 bloods and 25 impacts. Uncheck that, and I'm going to shoot. And wow, look at that, look at that, look at that. Ah! Notice that I've stopped generating wall impacts. I can shoot my zombies real quick so they'll stop bothering me. They're not really bothering me anyway, but I've stopped generating wall impacts because all the ones that are in this that are in my pool have been activated, and so they're all active. So when I call getPooledObjects, it says go get me the next one that's inactive and put it where I need it to be. Well, there's none that are inactive, so it just stops, which is sometimes what you want it to do. But remember, we have in our object pooler we have the should expand tag. So I'm going to take this down to 3 so we can more clearly see what's happening. And I'm going to click should expand. Press play. And I'm going to shoot. And the script automatically adds things to the pool as needed. Now, this hasn't quite solved my problem yet, because now in the game I still have all these clones, and I can create as many as I want, and I can drive the computer into the ground. What I need to do now is put in logic to disable these components. And the way we're going to do that is with a new script called disable impact. So I'm going to grab my, I'm going to go to my scripts folder actually. I'm going to right click and do create C# script. And I'm going to call it disable impact. I'm going to double click on it to open it up in Visual Studio. And this is a very, very simple script. I'm going to say public float my disable time. In other words, after how many seconds do you want me to disable this thing? And public float my start time. And that is, when did I start? I'm not going to do anything in the start function, and I'll get to why we're not going to do it that way in a second. Well, let's just move on. So, and then in our update, I'm going to say if time.time, remember that's the time since the game, the time in seconds since the start of the game, which is what my tooltip says right there. If my time is now greater than my start time plus my disable time, then GameObject dot dot set active to false. So now it's going to disable it after a certain amount of time. And I want to create one more function in here called public void set start time. And it's going to say my start time is equal to time dot time. So what this does is says when I set my start time, I'm going to grab whatever seconds have lapsed since the game has started, and then I'm going to check every frame until I have passed my disable time, and once I've done that, I'm going to disable the object. Okay, so I'm going to click save, and we can do the thing we did before where we set a bool in here so it only checks it once and blah 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 blah, but this will work just fine. Because when things are disabled or inactive in the hierarchy, nothing happens with them at all. So, I'm going to go to my effects. I'm going to affect new blood. I'm going to add component, disable, impact. And I'm going to set my disable time to be, let's say, 1.5 seconds. I'm going to leave my start time set at 0. I'm going to go to my wall impact, add component, disable impact, also 1.5 seconds. Okay. So now let's press play and watch what happens in the hierarchy. Again, I'm going to use up the clones I have in my list because I made the list way too small to begin with pretty quickly. Oh, wait, something happened. Let me pause my zombies here for just a second. Inactive. Did I not compile my note? No, I did. Okay. So let's go to my object pooler and make sure we've got new blood and control impact. And we're going to press play. So something has happened, and oh, there it is. And my impact is no longer being created. Did I update the wall impact? I did, because it was working a second ago. Well, darn. Oh. Okay, so what's happening is, this is exactly the example I wanted to show you. I just forgot what I was doing. So what's happening is, the start time is never set. It's always set at 0. So we need to change that so that it's set when we generate the impact. So let's go back to our script here, to our shot handler. And inside my if loop, let's set the start time. My effect dot get component disable impact dot set start time. And it will set the start time correctly. So what's happening is the start time is never changed from 0. So the first one goes off because I fired it as soon as the game starts, but after that it doesn't work because the disable time is 1.5 seconds, and all the seconds past 1.5 seconds plus 0 is all of the game. So it only works for the first second and a half, and otherwise it disables the impact, which means that every time I instantiate it or enable it, it's being disabled. So that's what was happening there. So let's try this again. Hopefully this will make more sense. Okay. Bang, bang, bang. So I've shot the wall 3 times, but all 3 of my clones are now disabled, which is what I want. So I'm going to... Oh, come on. That should have worked. Oh, I didn't save it. That will definitely work. Definitely. Okay, hit play. Bang, bang, bang. And notice that you can see that they're a little bit that they're grayed out when they're disabled. When I shoot, it becomes bolded, and then it gets grayed out again as it becomes disabled. So you can actually watch it be activated and deactivated. I can shoot once, wait a second and a half, and it's going to activate the same one over and over. If it needs to have 2, it'll get the first 2. If it needs to have 3, it'll get the first 3. And if I just go crazy, it'll just keep adding them in. But notice that it's stopping after a certain point because I can't click fast enough to get through all the ones that it now has active. That's the magic of this thing. Is there's a limit to it. Limits not in an abusive way, but it limits the number of objects that are created to only what is actually needed, and it will keep up with us as much as we want it to. And the same thing if I change this wall. If I change this wall here, this wall. Where's it? Yeah. Change this to zombie. Play. Then it'll generate new blood clones to keep up with the demand. Except for that it won't, because I in turn should expand on for blood clones. So it's only going to generate 5, and then I don't have any for a second. Then it'll go back to generating them. So that's the difference between should expand and not. What you want to do ideally is guess how many your player is going to need. So looking at that, I'm going to go to my object pooler, and I'm going to set my new blood impact to 20, my effect wall impact to 20, and I'm going to set both of them to should expand. If I can somehow get to where I have 20 spurts of blood in the scene, I want the game to keep generating them for me. So, press play again, and I can generate blood impacts all day long. I'm never going to get past too many, and if I do happen to somehow manage to click fast enough to get through 20, it will just generate more as needed, which is a really good implementation. It keeps your game's memory data small and manageable, while also providing everything that you need for the game, and you don't have to guess. It'll just take care of it for you. Pretty excellent implementation. Like I said, yeah.
I'm getting null reference exceptions now.
Okay. Let's pause my recording here.
I seem to always get these.
You're not alone. Share your screen with me.